My name is James Dellow. I'm a 19-year-old with a love for space and a passion for photography and videography. And this is my journey to awaken the stars. It all started with a love for space. As long as I can remember, I have loved space, and I still do today. It kind of came from either like the picture books that I read when I was a toddler, or through the movies I loved, like Star Wars and Armageddon, and also through physics class back in primary school, which we used to call PSHE days or something like that. In short, if you can name it, it probably inspired little me to get interested about the wonderful aspect of outer space. Now, I remember when I was a little toddler, I used to look out, basically look up to the stars, and seeing them just penetrate our atmosphere and into my little eyes, I just always pondered and just always asked the same two questions. What could be out there? And what could be waiting amongst the stars for humanity to discover? Then two questions welded the interest of space for the rest of my life. But my perspective of the night sky would change many years later. I remember one day in 2023 of discovering some photos online of these incredible landscape photos taken at night, and I just been impressed of how many stars there were. I didn't know at the time, but this is actually a genre of photography called astrophotography, and just seeing through them, it just got me hooked. And again, while being surprised of how many stars, it also made me wonder, are these fake? After a little bit of searching and watching way too many videos on YouTube and stuff about this topic, I eventually come to terms that these were real, and actually surprised that this is actually something that photographers do. Only a special group though. And more surprisingly, it could be done with almost any camera. Right there, after discovering it, it kind of became my goal to hopefully, at some point, to capture those somewhat similar and kind of bring those distant stars and galaxies, if it even, back into the public spotlight. But I know that this was going to be a problem. I know that this goal of mine became the very foundation for this journey that would take me a long time to fulfill. Let's start with the beginning. My first steps started on January 5th, 2024. This was the day when my camera that I ordered 2 days prior arrived at my doorstep. After unboxing it and everything and just looking at it, I knew that I would try and replicate those photos, and this would be my first step into this story of astrophotography. To start this journey, we need to go back to January 8th, 2024. This was a few days after my camera arrived that I ordered prior to this day. On the other hand, I did some research on some of the settings that I needed for, to try and take photos. And on the same night, I would take my very first nightscape photo. And this is the result. Not the greatest, but I'll carry on. A few months later, I would take 2 more photos while I was on a trip in Tenerife. As you can see, these two have the same results of the other one, but the sky is more clear. But yeah, I was gutted and stuff, so I decided to shelve the idea of doing astrophotography, because after doing some research, it came out that I needed specific lenses and sometimes I needed a specific camera. So I decided to shelve it and just hoped that sometime in the future I would get the opportunity to do it again. Little did I know that nearly a year later I would get an opportunity to try again and continue this journey. It's now March 2025. A lot has happened since then. Over the last 6 months, I've been experimenting with the media's new camera system that they've recently bought, plus with the 2 lenses. Little did I know that this thing would be the missing piece to my first steps into astrophotography, and that camera is the Sony Alpha 7 Mark III. This camera, along with the 2 lenses that comes with it, has been great for my filmmaking and photography projects as I've gone through my course. But the idea of doing astrophotography with this camera stayed on the back of my mind, but it has always been there, waiting for it to be unleashed. But when I was researching this, I discovered a phenomena that is a cause for concern, especially if you care about the environment and your health. This phenomena is something you probably see every night. Depending on where you live, it may be even worse, or it might not exist. This is called light pollution, and it's probably something that everybody who's watching this should be concerned of. It definitely concerned me when I was researching this. So, I know it sounds extreme, but it's true. But to understand what I mean by that, I decided to invite somebody who's more specialised in this field. He has agreed to appear for an interview, and he's from Jodrell Bank, but he mostly spends his researching time on the main campus at the University of Manchester. So, let's go meet him, shall we? Oh, by the way, just a quick warning to you. He might look familiar or look similar to somebody you've probably seen around. But anyway, let's go meet him, shall we? Hi, I'm David Allen. I'm a professor at the University of Manchester in the Astrophysics department. Hi Dave, do you mind me calling you Dave, or what do you want me to call you? I don't really mind Dave or David, but I would prefer it if you would call me Professor James. Okay, sounds good to me. Professor, so light pollution, what do you know about it? Because I know it affects us astrophotographers, but how does it affect your research, and are there any side effects I should be worried about? Oh, good question. I'll start with what it is. In short, light pollution is like wasted light that has wandered off of its intended point of where the light is facing. Seriously? Yeah, really. Let me give you an example. Imagine a street lamp on the side of a major motorway or major street. Okay. Have you ever noticed at the top of those lamps you have quite small ones? Most modern streetlights have like really small caps. These are quite bad because they emit some light going upwards like this. Like, see with that, you got a cone like that. So the tops of those lamps are small, and the light, I'm guessing the light is bigger than the roof, correct? In a way, yeah. If you're basically kind of talking about the older models, but in most newer ones you have LEDs, but the way out of those LEDs, they do shape, like kind of like escape going like that way. I mean, the light escaping is just reflection on the ground that's going up. It's in small quantities, but if you have a big enough cap and if it's done properly, it can be small. Okay, that's interesting. Does that also correlate with external lights like those on the side of some skyscrapers in Singapore and Dubai, or those lights directly up the Eiffel Tower? Oh, absolutely. In short, if there's artificial light that is not controlled or contained properly, yes, that does correlate to light pollution. How bad does that affect your colleagues at Jodrell Bank when they try to observe the night sky? Good question. To be honest, I'm not too fully sure, because Jodrell Bank is something that we call a radio telescope, which looks out for signals in outer space that turns it into electrical data that we can see images. Signals are waves that emit from stars and other planets and whatever else. I mean, even the satellites can detect that, but it's in smaller ways now. Yeah, that makes sense, because if the telescope detected all those radio waves from satellites in Earth's orbit, Jodrell Bank would basically be kind of useless. In a way, if Jodrell Bank was an optical telescope, you wouldn't want to put that next to a light polluted area like Manchester or London. Yeah, you're right. That wouldn't be that wise to put an observatory that uses an optical telescope next to a major populated area with a lot of light pollution. I mean, it's just kind of common sense. Fair enough. My next question is, does light pollution negatively affect our health? Like, what's that about? Oh, God, yes. It's more on the mental health side, but yes, it does affect us quite badly. Okay. Yeah, to be honest, I'm quite surprised, to be honest. This doesn't get talked about on mainstream media for some unknown reason. I mean, yeah, but whatever. So on that question, I'll try and shorten this down for you. First of all, our sleeping patterns break under light pollution. What I mean by that is we have a biological clock in our brain that gets reprogrammed, and that is what makes us wake up at different times, because our biological clock thinks it's still bright out, even though it's 12:30 in the morning. By the way, a biological clock is your brain's way of decoding the day and night cycle that we are quite familiar with on Earth. Every living thing has it, and if you've noticed that you've woken up at different times or gone to sleep at different times in a major populated area, that basically is the reason why light pollution can really affect it. What other ways does light pollution affect us? Can you explain that? Well, this is kind of broad, but I'm going to try and recite this properly. I mean, there have been some studies that have happened over the years, mostly on people who are living in these really light polluted areas. These folks actually have been found to have a really high chance of developing depression, insomnia, heart disease, and sometimes even cancer. But the chance of that is really low. So, yeah, I mean, it affects everybody. Oh, wow. Okay. That's really bad. We haven't really talked about it yet, but I want a quick answer. How bad does light pollution affect Mother Nature as a whole? Oh, good question. Yes, it does. Some types of birds, from what I know, rely on the night sky. I mean, for navigation. I mean, think of it as our ancestors in the ocean. And plus, the birds, I've heard some species of, like, in the water does it. Well, in the sea, do it like sea creatures, but don't fully know about that. But what that does for those birds in more particular, and some of those animals, when navigating at night, if you see a giant city glow, you will get thrown off, because it's a completely different area. The birds might not know the area very well, and if they can't see those like astronomical areas that they might recognize, they get lost. And you know, the biological clock thing that I said, if you remember, I just said about all life has it. I mean it. Any type of life on Earth, including like tiny animals and ants. But I mean, look at ants. They have it as well. Everything on planet Earth has it. Anything that lives. I'm not sure about like viruses or bacteria. I mean, I'm not a biologist. I'm an astrophysicist who also does stuff about light pollution. But yeah. Yeah, I mean, I hope that answers it, but those studies of like linking depression and heart disease, I kind of, so heart disease and cancer, I kind of find, I don't fully think that's true, but again, they're not really well sourced. I was only told, and I can't really find them. They're probably not accessible on the internet somewhere. But anyway, I hope that answers your question. Again, just take that last bit about our health with like cancer and disease and like heart disease. Just take that with a grain of salt because I'm not 200% sure. You might want to speak with like a more like medical person who might know about it. But yeah, I hope that answers that. Yeah, sounds good. I mean, I'm pretty sure that's all the questions I want to ask really, but yeah. Thank you. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. Thanks for coming. Oh, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah. All right, that's it. Thanks to the professor, we now know what light pollution is and the effects it has on our health and on the environment. But why is it so important to the rest of our story? Well, it kind of came down to trying to capture the stars while at a location that is near a major city. That is where our next part of the story continues. Fast forward to the first week of April of 2025. At this point, I have done a ton of research into the astrophotographer Brad Goldpaint. During my research, I learnt a lot about astrophotography during that time. Plus, the weather forecast was showing clear signs of clear weather over the next couple of weeks. After learning about this, I already knew that I was being given a clear shot to try and capture the stars, so I acted quickly. A couple of days later, on the 3rd of April, I decided to take the opportunity to strike. I asked my teachers if I could borrow some camera equipment for the next couple of weeks, basically during the Easter holidays. They agreed and they let me go and grab my equipment. Let me tell you about what I borrowed. The first was the Sony Alpha 7 Mark III. This camera was released back in 2018 with the original MSRP of $1,999 or 1,500 British pounds. This camera has a full-frame 24 megapixel sensor with 15 stops of dynamic range. It also contains an ultra-fast autofocusing system, a 5-axis in-body image stabilizer, the ability to record in 4K, and has both SL-Log 2 and 3 pre-installed. The first lens I chose was the 16-35mm f2.8 full-frame lens. This lens is interesting because of its ability to stay at a constant aperture no matter what focal length you set it as. And finally, for the second lens I went with was the Sony 35mm f2.8 crop lens. This is a prime lens, which basically means it has a fixed focal length of 35mm and a minimum aperture of f1.8. The side effects of it being a crop lens, however, is that it has a 1.x times crop factor, effectively making this thing a 52mm lens when compared to a full-frame sensor. You can basically make this work when you enable the crop mode on in the camera settings. The reason why I chose both of these lenses is because I wanted to try a few different shot types. The 16-35mm is really good for those really wide angle shots, and the 35mm prime lens is more ideal for those close-up ones, which basically makes it, as I said earlier, it's a 52mm lens at full frame equivalent, and is also able to capture an extra stop of light compared to the 16-35. And that's basically there. After obviously packing it up and signing them out, all I needed to do is take them home and wait for the best time with the best conditions. And that came sooner than I thought. Fast forward to the 8th of April 2025. The time is 10:15 p.m. This was my first attempt. I remember the conditions were perfect, and I decided to take action. I remember taking out my equipment into the garden and started setting up. The first lens I decided to go with was the 35mm f2.8 prime lens. and for my first attempt. I attached it to the camera, then put it onto the tripod that I already set it up. I already had the shutter speed calibrated thanks to doing some calculations for the 500 rule, which is where you take 500 divided by your focal length, and that's your answer. But for me, I did focal length times 1.5, then do 500 divided by that. You can get the idea. But yeah, so I basically put that in and dialed in the rest of the settings, the aperture and everything else. After doing all that, I also pulled focused onto the furthest star I could possibly see on the screen with zooming in, and I started shooting. It's to note that I took a lot of photos because I was basically adjusting the aperture, the ISO, to make sure that I can get the right exposure with basically creating the cleanest shot, while also adjusting the focus so I can basically have the sharpest I could probably get. You can basically guess how that went. But that didn't stop there. After that photo shoot, I did an additional 2 more photo shoots, but this time over at a small village outside of Sheffield, which is where my grandmother lives. And that's where this is where I started doing the editing. After coming home and basically plugging everything into my computer, I had a total of roughly around 100 photos during the 2 weeks of shooting the stars. I predicted that I probably would be able to get 6 shots, 5 or 6 to be more exact, after touching up in Lightroom. But my God, I had a bit more than I bargained for. After 4 hours of editing that very same day, or throughout 2 days, can't really remember, I actually came out with 10 edited photos, 20 if you count the before and after, but yeah. Now these photos did turn out great, but they weren't as vibrant as sharp compared to like Brad Goldpaint's or any of the other astrophotography guys online. It's because of the light pollution, but the light pollution was okay and bearable, even for shooting in near a major metropolitan area. Now, I know that these photos are generally not perfect, but they're a major step into this long journey that I decided to go on. I hope that these photos can get to the public, and I want them to kind of see what they're missing above their heads. Seeing those photos will probably spark curiosity and maybe inspiration to either try it themselves or, more importantly, influence them to hopefully start a spark and hopefully lit a fire that will bring change to the world and hopefully bring the night sky to its former glory. I hope you enjoyed seeing those photos. It took me a long time to get to where I was at right now, over a year at the minute, but it doesn't mean that my journey is over. At this current, as I'm recording this right now, I'm still on my journey to hopefully get something as close to the pros can get, but that will take time, and I don't know when that will be. But if I ever make any progress, I will assure you that I'll make this. This documentary is both a submission to as my final part of my FMP, but also this documentary changed and became more symbolic because this documentary is bringing awareness to something that you would never probably thought about: the effects of light pollution on the human, basically human health and also the environment. But if that sounds concerning to you, it should be. And I think it's time to act on it, don't you think? So, if you're from the United Kingdom, I'd like you to, if you're interested of even like speaking this out to the government, try and talk to your local MPs. Your MPs is your ticket to potential parliamentary change. I'm also thinking of opening up a petition on change.org, but if I do, there'll be links down in the description. But anyway, also if you're outside of the UK, try and generate as much noise on social media. Tell everyone that you know. Try and speak to your local politicians if you're able to. Anyway, that's everything I've got for now. I hope you enjoyed this documentary as much as I did while making it. This has been James Dellow from Dellow Productions. I'm signing off, and I'll see you guys later. Goodbye for now.